Hey Stillwater, welcome back to the Still Connect podcast, a podcast all about Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm your host, Denver Evans, a born and raised Stillwater local and owner of Stillwater Digital Marketing. Each week, I'm sitting down to have a friendly chat with a local business owner or community leader who helps make Stillwater such a great place to live in. So, whether you're a longtime resident or just a visitor, this is your place to stay plugged in, stay inspired, and still connect with the stories that shape our community. Also, the podcast is a real tour of Stillwater, so this is actually a mobile podcast that I record on location, usually in the business of the person I'm interviewing. So if you ever want to watch these interviews, you can watch the video version if you aren't already. Today's episode is just an audio episode, and I'm super excited to introduce Jase Depperschmidt with Archetype Homes. Let's jump right into the conversation. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and all the businesses you have.
Okay. I was born in Kansas, moved here in second grade, went to Richmond Elementary School.
It's a good school.
Yeah. Graduated in 2012 from Stillwater, and then graduated from Oklahoma State in 2016. So I've been here a long time. My wife and I have several seems like they're very different businesses, but we have a mobile detailing company that I started right after college called My Mobile Detail. And then my wife has a salon here in town with a friend. They co-own together. And then we have a home building and design business as
Archetype.
Well. So yeah, Archetype Developments.
Awesome. So tell me just kind of a little bit of the story of how you kind of got started and went from one to the next.
Yeah. So with Archetype, I really have always kind of had this inkling towards I'd say interior design and architecture. Really, my dad was owned a commercial construction business my whole life. He still does. And then my mom is an interior designer, decorator. And so together they did a lot of projects and I got to see it all. And, it sparked my interest from a young age. And so in 2020, we had already built our first house. That was something that we did shortly after getting married. But we built it and then immediately I was like, this was awesome. It was like a huge creative outlet. It was like years and years of being a kid and dreaming of doing these things finally coming to life. And so I did it and I sold our first home that we built. And in that process, I actually got some custom home clients. And then kind of by accident, it just happened. And they're awesome. So if you're watching this, they really were great to work with. But I started in 2020. I built our second home and at the same time built their home. And then it just turned into a full-blown business.
That's awesome. So coming up on 5 years.
Yeah, coming up on 5 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So tell me more just kind of about what your projects look like. Do you just do full home builds? Do you do like small renovation, additions?
Really, I started out with just custom homes, but slowly morphed into like small, like single room, like renovations. And then that turned into large additions and large renovations. And so right now, primarily I'm doing custom homes and then like luxury remodels of one. It can be a small space. Like I do just master bathrooms or sometimes just kitchens, but large additions and large scale remodels of like a whole home at once is kind of one of the things that I really enjoy and specialize in. So
yeah, that makes sense. Very cool. So you grew up in Stillwater.
Yeah.
What are some things just over like the last several years that you've kind of seen change, grow in Stillwater that you've enjoyed?
I would say I think the one thing that's changed a lot is just how many people are moving into town. I'm getting to work between all my businesses. I'm seeing and meeting so many awesome people. It's interesting that Stillwater has like such cool people. You don't always get to meet everybody, but so that's one thing I really like. I love that we're pouring into our downtown right now. I love that we're really developing just big giant areas of nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's housing or just businesses, I love what I'm seeing from other local entrepreneurs who are really pouring into that downtown area that we're going to make really cool, I think. And then the hub, obviously, over here by where I'm at.
Well, I'm like 12th Street.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago.
Nothing.
There was nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now and honestly, they're doing some cool things with that. The soccer field's back behind there. We have, it's really nice to have like Stillwater Medical Center here and the college. Between the two are really, really developing things, which is cool.
It's really great. Yeah, OSU's been huge for Stillwater's growth and development. I think you mentioned earlier before we were kind of talking about how it's just a matter of time before Perkins is like a suburb.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's crazy because even right now when you're driving that road, there is no gap, no spaces between those two. It's very connected. And I mean, the amount of clients that I'm working with who are moving that direction, buying land that direction, developing that direction is insane. Yeah. It's just really interesting. I think at some point we aren't probably going to see a huge separation there.
Yeah. It's pretty industrial right now in terms of like the businesses in between there, but it'll be really fascinating to see what kinds of like stores, grocery type places kind of pop up in between there. Cause eventually there's going to be people who are going to want something a little bit closer than, 10 or 15 minutes south of town.
Yeah, for sure.
So
honestly, there's a few, I guess you're right. There's Tractor Supply. We have a Dollar General there. We have a couple things, but yeah, probably just a matter of time. Every piece of land there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's just I shoot a lot of real estate photography. So I feel like I spend so much time kind of out that direction. When one of the agents that I work with had a lot of listings in Trio Ranch. Yeah. When that whole neighborhood really like popped up. Or Trio Ridge.
Pretty quick.
Trio Ridge, I should say.
Trio Ridge. Yeah. I really didn't even know about that neighborhood until I want to say it was probably like a couple of years ago, but I drove by and I was like, I came out of nowhere. Yeah. I didn't even see the prep. It was just like, bam. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is interesting. I think it's helpful for people who kind of want to be out. They don't want to be inside a city, but still feel like they have the perks of a community. So,
well, and it has great access because it's right there on 51.
Yeah, so for sure. You can go either way. Also, it's like right in the middle.
So you graduated from OSU?
Yep.
Immediately started Mint Mobile Detail?
Yeah. So really it's interesting because, I told you a little bit about my parents and what they did and how that kind of impacted me. But when they built their own home, it was like 2006. I was in sixth grade and it was really interesting to me. I just like fell in love with the whole, like I watched them draw their plan out. I watched them execute. Like we went out ourselves and helped and cleaned the job site. And like, I just got to see every phase. And it was just so intense for me to be like, wow, like I just loved it. And I took all that, all those elements, and I wanted to be a residential architecture or residential architect, forever. And it really wasn't until they came to our high school. They had like a career day. Oh yeah. And they had OSU students in each classroom. And you would go to each classroom that you were interested in learning more about. And so, I went to the architecture one first because I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And they had like a slideshow and they're like, our dropout rate currently 80%. And I was like, and then they were like, and here's like our classroom, and they were showing these desks, and I noticed like there's cots attached to the desks. And I was like, and then they were like
you're gonna work, sleep,
yes.
work, sleep.
I was like, what? And then they had like a thing on like salaries, and one of them was like residential architects. Like if you start at a firm, like you're probably starting around 50,000, and like they did like a higher end number, and it was still like 6 years of school, and I was like,
oh no.
It's not for me.
Yeah.
So
you got to figure out something better.
I just did not. I think that for me was like, I don't think that makes sense for me because I'm a weird Dave Ramsey kid. And so I was like, I'm going to go through school debt free. So I was also like, no, feasibly 6 years of school. That's even harder than 4.
Right.
So I shifted. I was like, I'm just going to do business. But yeah, I went to business school. I started Mint Mobile Detail the month I graduated officially. And then that was great. And I think a lot of people were like, these are very different. Like you have 3 very different, but if you think about it, all 3 of them are very aesthetics driven, I think for me, my passion is taking something and making it better. That's just how my brain operates. And so that's just my skill set. So I apply it anywhere, whether I'm cleaning cars at the beginning or training. Now I train on that, but from that to, building a home, you're taking a vision in your head of what could be and executing it. So, they're very different, but related. And I think that's kind of how that all came to be.
That makes sense. So you said you kind of got your first clients almost kind of on accident.
Yeah. I was not like, it was just, I listed our house, I designed and built our home. And then when they came, I can't remember if like they made an offer, but I went with a different offer, or if they just were like, hey, would you build with this budget? They might, but they looked at the house that I had for sale and then wanted to build. And so I was just like, yeah, let's do it.
Very cool. Very cool. So what was that first project like?
So our first house was really interesting because it was a drawing that I did while I was still in college. And so we just, when we were newly married, we didn't know a lot. Especially as an entrepreneur, like, how do we do this with our taxes? Like, did not know what we were doing. We were paying way more in taxes than we should have because we just didn't have things how we should.
Right.
And so it was really interesting. We learned a lot. Like, for proof of income, if you're going to build a home and get a loan, like, you have to have 2 years of tax returns. And we're like, but we have this money. And it was like,
right,
you don't have 2 years of tax returns.
Yep.
So it was like,
we had the exact same thing.
Yeah. It throws you off. And then you're like, man, okay. And then besides that, you have just so many elements of entrepreneurship's very nuanced. Like, there's so many things like that you have to learn. So now we have things set up way differently where we wouldn't have had to do that. And if we would have known what we knew now, we would have just been able to build when we wanted. But that first process was really just figuring out the order of things. Each individual person that came to do something on site, what order, sequence.
So you're your own like general contractor?
Yes. And learning every single aspect and, what order that needs to be in and how to execute it properly. And, it was really nice for me because it was my own house. So if I forgot about this,
you're not disappointing someone else.
No one else, just me, and learned so much. I was able to, and honestly, still love that home. Every time I build and then move, I'm like, I wasn't quite ready to leave that one.
Oh yeah.
I like all of them, but
So you like build house, live in it, sell it.
That was our original plan.
Okay.
It just turned into a business.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
It was more of like, hey, I wanted to do this my whole life and I'm just going to do it for me,
Yeah.
And then it was like, I love it so much. I can't help it. I build a home and then immediately I have 15 ideas. I'm like, so if I didn't have clients right now, I probably would have like remodeled my house.
Well, that's good.
The same with my wife. We both just have, honestly, we're both really creative, but I'm not naturally as, entrepreneurship's one of those things where you plan it all out and Friday, everything's different than what you planned. It does not matter what you planned. Friday's different. So you just learn, that's one thing you learn when you own your own business is that you can plan everything and you're still going to have 15 curveballs and how do you handle it,
Yeah. So part of the reason that I started this podcast is because I've worked with last time I counted, it was over 70 Stillwater businesses.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many business owners just about their strategy because what I do is I create content for them, photo, video, graphic design, manage some social media, that kind of stuff. And so we're always trying to make sure that fits in with their business plan. Business plans change all the time.
Oh yeah.
So sometimes we're going to go left and then it's like hard right. But I think a lot of people who maybe just work like 9-to-5 jobs have no idea everything that goes into small businesses. And I imagine since you've had 3 very different businesses, similar in the aesthetics, but very different in terms of operation.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, people don't know about small business loans, what debt looks like.
What's weird. And I'm fortunate enough, that we didn't have to do a huge amount of loans or anything like that. But one thing that's really different is I feel like a mindset shifts a little bit because when you work somewhere, I feel like a lot of the things that you just don't even have to think about, someone else is having to think about.
Yep.
And you don't realize until you're owning a business what that really does shifting. It shifts your mind. You're not thinking like, I don't know. It just shifts everything. You're not thinking about, you're more thinking about everyone that you have depending on you for, work.
Right.
And so it shifts a little bit because when you're working somewhere, you don't have to worry about that. You're like, I'm just here to do this one thing.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And then you have, on the flip side, you have people who, they're like, okay, I have to do these 15 things that have to get done so that this person can even do their job when they get here.
Right. Right. I heard a quote one time. It was that business owners would make the best employees.
Yeah. 100%.
But you can't hire them.
No. You can't, because the one thing that you can't give them if they're working for you is the freedom.
Yeah, and just that ownership of like, I want to make this happen because a lot of times when you have an employee, unless they're highly incentivized, you have like a sales position or something like that, they're not, if their income is capped, their effort is going to be capped.
Yeah.
But when you run your own business and you realize that you're the ceiling on your own success.
But also that's not how it works when you're a small business, because your income doesn't cap when that's the other thing people are depending you on.
Right.
It's like, hey, are you able to move this along when it's tough? There's, and that's not always the thing. And that's what, a lot of people who are happy in a position that they're just being employed, it's because they don't have the stressor of like, what do I do when something goes wrong?
Right.
It's just different.
If something goes wrong with the business, it's my boss's problem.
Yes, I'll go get a different job.
I just have to show up. I just have to, either I go and get a different job or I just have to show up and do my part, something like that. So, yeah. And I think for a lot of people, being a small business owner is kind of isolating, because you feel like a lot of times you don't, especially people like us who became entrepreneurs at kind of younger ages, instead of working somewhere for 20 years and then deciding to do something in our 30s, 40s.
And I have very different, I have multiple businesses, but very different the way that they're ran. I have an S Corp, I have a C Corp, and I have an LLC, and they're ran completely different. One has a board, one has, we have co-owners, one of them is just owned by us. So, it's very different. They're all ran differently. They all have different requirements. And so it is interesting, you are collaborating on some level at all times. And it is, that's just something that you just have to figure out, is like, how are you going to operate this in the best way for the people who work for you, who depend on you? And how are you going to operate this, also to provide the best result to the people who are paying you for a service? And so those operations, they're a lot to, and I think that's the main thing, is like, entrepreneurs are everything, right? How many hats do you have to wear in a day? It's like, like for me, I'm like, I'm training you on cleaning a car. I'm here to remodel your whole house. So it's like,
or you'll have to take a call for one while you're doing the other.
Yes, exactly. So, you really don't get to control that if you're doing multiple, but, I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard recently, it's like, if it feels overwhelming, and really for me, I'm not naturally inclined for risk. I'm very type A. I like to have a plan, and so I really have had to learn how to do that well, or, how to manage just things not being exactly how they should be in your head.
Yep. What's that been like?
Yeah. It's a learning. I feel like every day I'm that's a skill that you have to work on. It's not natural.
Yeah.
Like, people are not naturally risk inclined. It's something that you lean into in a way. And so, and it's not always risk. I think the word I'm really like more looking for is like the ability to be like flexible, sometimes it's a risk. Sometimes, it's more just like, how do I roll with this in the best way possible? And sometimes it's just making the next best choice, even if it's not the choice that you would have planned in the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's kind of like people, always say no risk, no reward.
Yeah.
The more risk you're willing to take, usually the more reward there is on the other side of that. But you just have to really believe in your vision. And I think having that determination, that just like that brute strength of will necessary to make a goal be accomplished.
Yeah.
When it came from nothing but your own mind.
And you know what I really think that is just consistency.
Yeah.
And whenever all you have is that vision, it's like, okay, because I will tell you, like, when I started the mobile detailing, when I was really trying to grow, and there was a phase where I was detailing every day, and like, it was hard to get good staff. I was having trouble finding really solid employees at that moment. But in my head, I'm like, man, my friends all got out of the same school I did and got a job somewhere. And like, I would go hang out with them. They're like, this is where I'm at. Like, they just, when young and dumb, they'd be like, oh, we're making this much now. And I'd be like, what am I doing? I'm cleaning cars, like, it just didn't add up always.
Yeah.
But I will say for sure, it's consistency, and it's not just for you, but the people who are looking to you to maybe use your service, they want to see that you're consistently showing up.
Yeah.
So, every vehicle that you're doing is getting cleaned the exact same way with a really happy client, because your consistency, and then over time, that's a foundation. And that's really what it is. It's like when you get to the hard spot, and that's why a lot of things are like one and done. You'll see a ton of, like, for example, yard companies. Someone's going to pop up and be like, start doing lawns. And then like 2 years later, it's like, oh yeah, you have to call someone else. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You're like, okay. But really what it was is just when it got real tough and they were like, it's not, the vision's gone. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to the next thing, so the consistency is what builds that risk factor, like being able, because really that's the thing, is like continually showing up and doing what you need to do for clients and for your team is the best way to grow. And nothing I've done where I've been consistent has, been a downside. That's one thing that just really builds a company.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people who start businesses who think they have a really cool, fun idea, but they just don't have that enough drive to create the consistency.
I feel like there's two types of people, and like you need one on every team, but like you have someone who's like, here's the vision. I'd say you're right. Probably most entrepreneurs are that way. Mm-hmm. I'm not that way. I'm like, here's the vision one time. Don't tell me about it again, because I have to do it. I have to go A to Z. Yeah. And like, I come in and I'm like I'm doing A to Z. I'm on like maybe D, and everybody's like Z. And I'm like, I'm just on D,
Yeah.
It's like,
well, and I bet, I mean, building and designing houses, it's that whole long process that you don't really know unless you've done it or been around someone who's done it.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're standing on the slab, and if all you can think about is Z, the thing that you have to be focused on is B. I just got the slab done. Here's the next phase, And so
your bathroom finishings don't matter right
now. We can't do that.
Yeah.
But see, it is hard, because I think that's the thing that clients are most excited about.
Right.
So that, and so I always a large amount of time at the beginning to go over these really cool ideas, or like lights that they like, things that we're not going to talk about for a while, but they just want to know that we're on the same page, like the same.
We're on the right path.
Yes, exactly. And so you have a little bit of that. My mind works in, I always say this about my brother. He's one of the best when it comes to vision casting of anyone I know. We could be at lunch. He's like, what'd be cool? What if this? And then he'd like lay out this huge idea, and I'd be like, yes. Like, I'm leaving lunch wanting to do it. And then I'm like, wait, I can't do this right now. But like, he just like vision casts so well. And then I'm always like, how do we do it? That's how my brain works, is how, these little steps.
Yeah.
But it's funny. And when it comes to like, anything faith-wise, I look at everything through a faith lens. But it's interesting, because whenever I was in like college, if I was in college and God just like laid out, hey, this is where you're going to be in 2024, I'd be like, I'm overwhelmed.
Right.
How am I going to do this? I would, my brain would break. It'd be fried. I'm like, how would I even get to that point? Like, I'm getting ready, graduating school. I'm getting ready to start a mobile detailing company, and to scale and grow. But if he was like, in 2024, you're also going to have this business and live here, and you're going to have 4 kids. I was like, I'd be like, what? Wait, you know what I'm saying?
3 businesses, 4 kids.
I'd be like, wait a second. Something, this is too much. And so it's kind of like that when you start a business. It's like, you can vision cast all you want, but like there has to be, you have to lean into like where you're at and just focus on that for a moment. Yeah. And over time it builds, but that's why for me, it's hard, because I'm like, sometimes just doing the next right move is better than just focused on Z for too long. It can be kind of like, make you freeze.
Yeah. Well, and I think even just this kind of like line of thought is just maybe really out there for a lot of people who aren't business owners, who haven't been through these types of processes before. Kind of the reason I started the podcast was because I just saw so many people who, very easily like talk bad about a local business online.
Yeah. When you own a business, that shifts completely.
Yeah.
Being mad about something at a restaurant.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you fully shift. Like, I don't know one person who I've seen do that where I'm like, they own a business.
I don't complain about anything anymore.
I'm
like, I get it, dude.
Yeah. You're like, listen, I understand. You're short staffed. Someone else is in the kitchen.
Right.
There's just things where you're like, it just shifts your mindset fully. And that's part of that mindset shift for sure.
It's like you might have a house full of sick kids.
Yes.
You're trying to run from the pharmacy to your house to your restaurant.
You got a surprise that you no longer can get X ingredient from this location. They're out. What are you going to do?
Yeah. No, we've worked with several restaurants, and there have just been situations like that where, whether it's like a bakery or something, and they're just like, oh yeah, we don't have that kind of flour anymore.
Yeah. And when you talk to an entrepreneur, that type of stuff is like debilitating, because you're like, wait, I'm dependent. And that's what I mean by being dependent, consistency. Part of like my brain is like, take it off the menu. Like if it's me, because I'm like, we're not going to serve a a random redesigned meal with a new recipe randomly that you're used to coming in and getting your usual. I mean, I just say it's better to, I don't know. As an entrepreneur, that's what I would feel like, or you figure out a new way and you learn something new.
Right. Well, so you were, you said take it off the menu. One of the people we worked with, it was a bakery, and bakers can buy this like basically pre-made cake mix. Yeah. It's basically, like you'd buy a box, you get all the powder. It's like that, but like industrial large size, quantities. Yeah. And all of a sudden they just couldn't get the same one anymore. And that was like their number one product. Yeah. That was like their main thing. And they were just like, do we make our own mix? Yeah. Do we try this other one? This other one doesn't taste as good. And so there's just all kinds of situations like that where sometimes you can work around it. Sometimes it's your main thing.
Yeah, you got to figure it out.
And either way, you have to figure it out.
And you grow. That's what I'm saying. Then the next time that happens, you're not debilitated anymore. It doesn't shock you. You're like, okay, I'll figure this out by the end of the week. Yeah.
Like you can never fully disaster proof your business.
No.
But it's kind of like every time the wave comes up, it's like the tide's rising. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, I see how I can make a little trench here.
I mean, even in like one of my businesses, if like there's been weird times, like COVID was a really weird time for a lot of businesses. But like if that happened again, 100% would know exactly what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Before that, never thought about what if there's a nationwide pandemic? Never would have thought about that.
So my wife and I got married in December of 19. Decided to work together in February of 20.
Yeah.
And so, wild times. But actually, that caused the marketing side of our business to take off because we were getting a lot of no's from local businesses who were saying, oh, I have all this like foot traffic. I don't really worry about my social media. I don't really worry about my website or my digital presence, anything like that. And then COVID happens and it's like,
there's a need.
Oh, now I'm trying to post to my like 50 followers, trying to keep my business alive. And it's like, well, the tide rose pretty quick on you in that situation. And so we were able to help a lot of businesses.
And sometimes that's cool because really looking back, you probably can see it, but all the businesses that you talked to that didn't need it, who ended up coming back, that's might just be what you're doing at that level of, of the game. Like somebody seeing a home that you built, like in my situation, they might see the sign out front when you built that house, and then they might not build for 5 or 10 years, but down the line, they're gonna be like, hey, I live next to the house that you built in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's where I get most of my stuff is just, it might not be immediate, but those little things matter.
Well, and I've seen a lot of your work and you do like a fantastic job. I feel like all of your designs are really like timeless.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you ever wonder if like 20 years down the line, if the style is going to be completely different?
I'm sure it is. Yeah. I mean, think about, I will tell you, my very first house, it was a brick home. I painted it white from the get-go. You would have thought that I was painting my house pink. I mean, my neighborhood was in shambles. They were like, oh, really? You can't paint brick. I'm like, I am going to paint the brick. And like, but why? Like, you can't paint it white. You can't paint brick. I'm like, I'm painting the house white. Yeah. I mean, like at one point, I think my HOA was like, can you like just give us some, you need to give us some paint samples of like what options, and I was like, my wife like gave me like 3 shades of white. I guess tell them like go nuts. Just
it's funny because now white brick is like
everywhere. But when we did it, it was like end of the world. You would have thought
you guys were like ahead of a little bit ahead of the curve.
And so that's a perfect example though. Like by the time we went to sell it, people were wanting that and there wasn't a ton yet. Inventory wasn't there yet. Right. Now it's very, very common.
Yeah.
And they've come a long way with paint. I think a lot of people who were very nervous about that were maybe thinking like it's gonna be a maintenance problem. But you're like, paint nowadays, they make paint specifically to paint porous stone.
Exterior brick.
Yes. Yeah. So, but it is just one of those things where, you might be, I try to do that. Like if you look at any of my projects, I always try to throw an element in there that you probably are not ever going to see like right now anywhere else. Yeah. And that's because at some point that's going to be the thing where you go, when you go into an old home, there's just something so cool that you could never do now. Like you would never be able to find it now.
Right.
But it's so cool and unique. That's what you want to do. So, and nowadays I think things are shifting. People want something very nuanced to them.
Yeah.
And I almost say, there was a time where everyone's like paint everything white and gray and appeal to the masses. Like you're selling a house, appeal to the masses.
That millennial gray.
Yes. And so, but nowadays I actually think if you really invest in just like a design that is maybe a little bit out there. When someone walks through your home, they're going to be like, I've never seen this before. Yeah. And all day long, they're like, what about the house that had the, tiled arch,
thing. Yeah. The fireplace in the corner.
Yeah.
The whatever.
Yeah. Just if there's or the light fixture, like just something that they don't ever see that would make it to where it's like they sticks in their head.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of stuff that I think is shifting.
That makes sense. I've shot literally hundreds of real estate listings, and there are still those that like stick out to me.
I mean, I'm not talking like carpet in the bathroom.
Yeah,
those are the things where you're like, no.
No, those are like, that's not sanitary.
But somehow they did it for a very long time for some reason. But like you have just, you can make some cool decisions that might be a little different, but might pick up later, like the white brick.
Yeah.
So I always try to do that when I'm building, a little bit ahead of what your neighbor, is going to do.
Yeah. So rule of thumb, just buy land and don't have an HOA, so nobody can complain about your.
Which is actually what I did.
Oh, really?
So when I had my first client, I was building a home for me and on this plot of land, and they got half of it and I got the other half, and built both at the same time. This was in 2020, and the land is actually in the neighborhood on the backside of someone else's property.
Oh yeah.
And so it was in the neighborhood, but was out of the HOA.
Oh, nice.
So it was kind of nice because I was like, I don't have to give you my white chips. But also, I will say that I love that neighborhood. Even though the HOA didn't like the brick being painted white, I think now they don't care at all. And it was fine in the end.
Well, and exactly. Like once it becomes a trend, then everybody's like, oh, cool.
Yeah, it's fine.
Let's do that too.
But also, the people that live in that neighborhood, I will say, I loved living in that neighborhood. It was amazing.
Yeah. So both of us kind of growing up in the early 2000s. Do you remember when everything was just like tan?
Yeah. It was like everyone's kitchen looked like a Italian bistro.
Right. Like
glazed walls.
Yeah.
And like a light fixture that was just like heavy wrought iron.
Right.
Like 2 bulbs. It was very dark.
But they would be like, it was always like curvy.
Yes.
Like,
everything had
French,
like a swirl.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. That's so
that's like all I'm remodeling right now is like these really beautiful homes, and honestly executed so well. There's some amazing builders, long-term builders in Stillwater. So a lot of times I'm going to homes that they did at that, 20 years ago that were amazing,
right,
but just need revamped. It's easy to do that when you have good bones. And so, that's helpful. But at the same time, sometimes it's just full. Got to start over.
Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on?
Or
is it just like everyone, you get more?
There's something I love about every project. I don't take a project on if there's not something that I'm just overly excited about. Because I think I told you this, but like I love to make things better. And so if I'm walking into a project and I like instantly in my brain can just envision an idea, I'm like, I've got to see it happen, Yeah. So, but I think for me, most recently I had a client, some clients from Colorado that were moving here.
Oh, nice.
They purchased a home. They weren't going to move into it till I had finished the remodel, and it was a full gut, the full interior. And they trusted me with so many cool things, and it was just like, it was insane. It was beautiful. The end result was insane.
Yeah.
And so I think that's my favorite project I ever did.
I do a lot of client work. I always love it when the client just goes, here you go. Yeah. And just like kind of hands you the keys.
Well, in this situation, they really were trusting me with a lot. They lived out of state. They came and visited throughout occasionally, but for the most part, a lot of it was FaceTime. A lot of it was my job to communicate.
Yeah.
And so just being able to communicate my ideas and then them trust me to execute the idea that I showed, was huge. I mean, that's honestly the most like magical moments that you want to post online, like of a home, design wise, are all because of my dog just walked out of here. Did you see?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Most of the time where I have clients who are trusting me to do something is when I can do the best result, because I'm able to make with anything design wise, there's so many tiny decisions. Yeah. And so if I don't have to run every tiny minuscule thing by something, but I just have a vision that I'm supposed to execute, it usually goes a long ways in the end result.
Very cool. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No. excited for Stillwater. I'm excited to see the rest of your podcast. There's a ton of awesome people who own businesses here. So
Yep.
That's about it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into that conversation with Jase. I hope you really enjoyed it. And there's always more where that came from. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay in the loop, as well as to share this podcast with all of your Stillwater friends so that we can grow this podcast, these conversations, and ultimately our community. If you want to go a step further and help bring these stories to life, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/stillconnectpodcast. For those of you who might not know what Patreon is, basically it's a platform where you can subscribe to get more than just these free podcast episodes that you're listening to. You can get access to online Q&As, in-person hangouts, patron-only polls, and other special requests for the podcast. No matter what your capacity for supporting the podcast is, every little bit helps grow this amazing community. And we all need community. So even when life gets busy, make sure you still connect.